After a long wait of 27 years, Michael got a chance to turn his dream into reality in the form of a video. He devised a plan to videotape his meditations in a small group studio video art course offered by the E-Media Department of the University of Cincinnati Raymond Walters College. Michael and his colleagues felt that this would be a great learning experience for the students.
I feel like the students really benefited from the opportunity to work on a project of this scope because they were able to get into what really happens when you get onto a set and doing video. You've got long days, 8 to 10 hour days that normally happen. You've got the drive of day after day after day of really focusing down hard on taking care of business and getting things done.
One of the reasons I selected this particular poem to do in the context of a project that was staffed by student crew is that, well, one, it's complex. It's long and kind of convoluted, and I felt that complexity would give the students a lot of places that they could bring stuff to the production.
A special feature of this video production was the tight schedule like that of a professionally staged production. The faculty's idea behind this schedule was to familiarize the students with the 8 to 10 hour shoots that would be common in the professional field.
This was a way for us to give students this experience of working under pressure by putting them under pressure. And it's, I think, not analogous to a real-world experience. It was a real-world experience. And the students who worked on that project, I think, came out the other side with a great deal of respect and understanding for what it takes to mount multifaceted project like that.
Oftentimes, you're not even able to get away for lunch. They really work you for the whole 10-hour day. And having an experience like that for the students where they really immerse themselves in a project and really work as a team collaboratively, it was a great experience for them. So the teamwork, the long hours, all of these things mirror what they're going to find out in the real world when they get there.
A meeting was held on June 23rd to discuss the different aspects of the production, as well as the future course of action.
So that pre-production planning meeting was very important because the students were able to be directly involved in solving the technical rigging problems of the equipment, the installation of it, and the building and design of the set. So it gave us a way also in which I think that we clarified and intensified in many respects the presentation aspects of the poem and kept the focus on the words and the music of the words rather than being distracted by looking for video footage that might illustrate the poem, which it really didn't need.
To have a pre-production meeting before this week-long project was, I'd say, absolutely critical. And the reason for that is because a lot of the people who were working on the project weren't heavily involved with the people in charge of it, like Mike Sanders and Bill Boyle, and because of that, they had to have this meeting in order to kind of get brought up to speed, in order to kind of know what's going to go on. So the meeting was essential.
It was very important because it was where most of the ideas that eventually translated into the practical assets of the film actually took place. For example, I worked on the lighting board for the film, and that was where that whole lighting board idea came out.
Since the popularity of jazz poetry peaked during the late 50s and early 60s, Michael's vision was to give the video a 50s feel.
When I was thinking about doing the video, much of the visual aspect of it was related to the beat poetry era. And I was looking at lots of photographs by Allen Ginsberg as well as other photographers from that period, and decided that I wanted to try to achieve that 1950s look, that vintage feel, set it in a coffee house, so that it also replicated the kind of environment that live jazz poetry was taking place in at the time. So the idea was to synthesize the look and feel as though it were a 1950s beat poetry reading in a coffee house.
The 50s feel worked very well. I mean, it really enhanced the message of the piece, since Professor Sanders was talking about the music of the 50s and the music of the era. It really helped to get into the culture and the feel of the time. And being in costume, being in the place and in the feeling of it really amplified the message he was trying to get across.
There was a lot of care taken into deciding what kind of props were going to be in the room, the way people who were going to be in the audience were going to be clothed. Was very strong, and we did the best we could to really stay in the period of time in the mid to late 50s, maybe early 60s time period, and really hit that well, I believe.
Michael envisioned a coffee house similar to the kind that became popular during the 50s, where live jazz poetry events were hosted.
It was pretty much replicating that period of time that the music emerged from, that Mike's poem was a response to, and being able to put that together and create that context of the coffee bar and work in that fashion really helped create context for the poem.
As you know, we put together a 50s era coffee shop, and one of my responsibilities was to get the props and the furniture and everything that we needed for the background. And surprisingly, to me, the hardest thing to find were the Chianti bottles to make the candle holders out of.
I thought that was probably one of the coolest things about this project, that we had a coffee house set. I mean, we took a rather, kind of plain studio and turned it into a coffee house. And, if you look at the footage, I'd say it's fairly convincingly a coffee house.
I think the coffee house set worked very well. I think that and the overall artistic design were some of the best aspects of the production.
A 7-camera setup was arranged in order to give the video a live performance feel. This multicam setup was definitely a new and exciting experience for the students. However, some crew members had a different take.
When Mike first said that we were going to be using 7 cameras, I think my initial response was, 7 what? We're going to use 7 cameras in this little space to do this one thing, and it was pretty, going to be a pretty challenging thing. When I think about it as an editor, I think I was probably the only one who was considering the post side of this project, because the way we recorded it was all supposed to be live, like it was being done like a live show. But taking 7 different sources and trying to put them together and also sync up the audio, which was coming from at least 4 or 5 different microphones, was going to be a serious challenge.
Doing a multi-camera setup wasn't anything new to me, but definitely the way we utilized some of those cameras was completely just out of the norm.
Well, I've only ever used 1 camera on a shoot. I think the 7 cameras allowed us to be very, very efficient with our time management. And it allowed us to get everything done in 1 or 2 takes, where it normally would have taken, that number times 7.
Because the piece was part poetry reading and part live music, managing the audio recording was difficult. With the addition of 7 cameras, the recording process became even more complex.
Managing the audio for this was very interesting. I had to do everything from capturing the main speaker, doing the meditations, as well as the audience ambience inside the cafe, and make sure I captured the music from the saxophone. And all that trying to work in with each other was a bit of a challenge. But I was able to do it and record it and multi-track it, and even split off some of that audio to some of the cameras so that we could, in post-production, place the audio, or place the clean, crisp audio in with everything else. And I think that was definitely a great experience. And just the ability to be able to do that on a set is phenomenal. Whenever you get a chance to do that on a project, it just makes everything 10 times better.
The production started on July 6th, and everything was taped within 3 days. During this time, almost everyone involved had some unique experience. For example, in the excitement of trying a Steadicam for the first time, a crew member forgot to press record. Since cigarettes and smoke were part of the visual field, some extras were required to smoke, and given nicknames like Smoke Machine, Tailpipe, and Smokestack Jack.
I had this idea that the set would be filled with smoke like an old coffee house, and one of the more absurd moments in the video was that as I'm trying to deliver the poem, I can't breathe during this, and I'm wheezing and sucking air, and Aaron Allen, who's doing the audio recording, was complaining about the wheezing noises that I was making.
No, it's the smoke.
Yeah.
I start hearing him go out of breath and start wheezing really bad, and I didn't know what was going on. So I'm behind the curtain, and I listen to Mike, and I go, "Hey, Mike, what are you doing out there? Why are you such short of breath?" He's like, "Well, it's all the smoke that's going on."
Mike was trying to deliver this performance, and he kept getting choked up on the herbal cigarette smoke that was floating around the room. He'd be in the middle of a sentence, and the words would just start to fade out a little bit.
We had David Hartz playing the bongos at the beginning there, sort of as an introductory segment, and so he was like our bongo beatnik at the beginning, and I think he cut a real realistic figure from the period. And we also took some liberties with some of that footage and made a little humorous video out of that he may want to withhold from circulation after he gets a chance to see it, which he hasn't yet.
Favorite experience was watching David Hartz because he looked like a beatnik. exactly like a beatnik, and that was hilarious.
My favorite part of the production was, probably the funniest at least, was when Kyle was running the Steadicam, and he did the entire shot, the entire Steadicam shot, got around the whole set, got everything he needed before he realized, oh hey, I forgot to hit the record button.
My favorite experience was just seeing the set come to life. It was really like jumping straight back into time. And in addition to that, like, there was just people smoking everywhere. And there was actually a guy there that would not stop smoking. Like, he just chain smoked. He was basically our human smoke machine.
When I look back at that shoot, I think the most amusing memory for me is when I took gaffer's tape and I made myself a mustache and a goatee to amuse the other people standing around me.
My favorite experience during a shoot was watching Lou go around and have to light 30 cigarettes and keep them all going at one time. She doesn't smoke, so she got a little green, and it was pretty funny to watch.
One of the more absurd moments was Tony Malone, who was playing the saxophone on stage with me during the production, from one day to the next, lost his jacket that he was shooting in, so we had to go around looking for his jacket so that we could actually shoot the second day of production. And it was emblematic of Tony as an absent-minded professor.
Once the shooting was over, the post-production phase started. New ideas for graphics were pitched, and new fonts were specially ordered to go with the look and feel of the video.
What we tried to do when we were developing the style of this video, we used specific fonts, which would be retroactive to the 50s and the 60s, that still had an edgy, current feel for the day. We used a few new fonts that would be Next Generation and Beatnik font, which had relevance to that day and the current day.
So overall, we were going for a beatnik feel, and Mike had supplied us with several references, and he wanted us to use them for art cards to go at the beginning and the end, and some even in the middle. And he had this great idea that at the end we should have characters of all of the crew members. And we went through all the references and we found one that was very, like, it just really struck us. It was very geometrical and everything, so that was the style we went for the ending credits.
While the graphics were being created, the arduous task of editing was started. Avid was used for editing, and for the first time a new monster, the multicam feature, was tried.
One of the techniques that I had to take advantage of in post was the multicam feature of the software. It's come a long way because originally when it was first with the software, you could only do about 3 or 4 cameras at a time. With the new versions of the composer software we're using, we could do up to 9 cameras at a time. So I could put all of our 7 camera sources in, and I could play them all at the same time and basically switch through them like I was doing a live show, which is the way that we intended this production to look. So in the end, having it set up that way, even with all those cameras, we got the desired result that we wanted.
Because we synchronized all the tapes with old-fashioned clapboards, we were able to sync all that stuff up and put it into the editing environment. And then I had this surreal experience of being able to actually direct the project as though it were being shot live with all these multiple cameras running simultaneously, and I was able to call the shots out from these different camera views, 7 altogether, and essentially cut the program as though it were being shot live with me as the subject. And that was a very strange experience, but it was really satisfying because we got a live feel in the cutting because we were actually cutting it live. But when we got into a jam and something messed up, instead of having to live with that like you would a live show, we were able to go back and fix that and then start fresh from that point and begin cutting it again as though it were live.